we've got to respect that.
George is upstairs.
Beautiful is this? How did the Irish do that one?
I think they've got Irish money as well.
Look on the left, you can order. Is that
First floor.
first floor?
With engineering 2 meetings going to there. First floor.
Well, this is a simply extraordinary turnout on an extraordinary day of activity for Palestine and against the crimes that are being committed. I had no idea that so many people would come. Indeed, when I turned into Queen's Road or Way and found an Irish Heritage Centre and found it entirely locked up and barricaded, I thought no one was coming at all. And then I drove 5 minutes and found this simply wonderful Irish centre, and my first duty is to thank from the bottom of my heart the management of this Irish Cultural Centre, which stepped in at the very last minute and offered us these facilities, and what wondrous facilities they are. So a big hand. It comes as no surprise to me, as half an Irishman myself, that the Irish hospitality for Palestine was so prompt and so complete, because Ireland has always been in the vanguard. The Irish people, I mean, the Irish government is something else, and they let the country down last week by their abstention on the vote in the United Nations, but that's another matter. The Irish people have always been in the forefront of solidarity with the Palestinians, and for obvious reasons. Palestine was given away by the very same empire that occupied Ireland for hundreds of years, and indeed occupies a small part of it until now. So thank you again to the Irish Centre. Why did we get into this situation? Because the cowards of the so-called Friends Meeting House, Quakers, I never thought the day would come when Quakers would be quaking in their boots at the prospect of an Israeli backlash against them giving a paid let to an anti-war meeting. But that happened just less than 48 hours before this meeting. A booking which we had made and had been confirmed by them in writing was cancelled. They came up with bureaucratic nonsense in the beginning as to why it had been cancelled, but when the media contacted them, they told the truth. They said they were concerned that too many people were going to turn up. And they based this on Facebook. They obviously don't know much about Facebook, but you know how you can click if you're going to attend something. Of course, people in Timbuktu click that they're coming to the meeting in Manchester on Saturday. And it did say that 10,000 people were coming. But if the Quakers had known anything about Facebook, they would have known that that wasn't likely to happen. In any case, they could have turned away every single person that made the hall over capacity. But they didn't. Instead, as cowards, they cancelled the meeting. And I'm very, very angry about it. It's caused a lot of angst and stress and cost, and they'll have to answer for that in the courts, if necessary. But on to the main business. This is a respect meeting. I'm a respect MP. My comrade Ron Mackay is one of our leaders, and he's here in case it gets unruly. Has to throw anybody out. He's another Glasgow man, we know about these things. But all are welcome. Indeed, Stop the War are distributing leaflets and putting up posters here this evening. Ron is their organizer, and he will contribute later about Stop the War events that are coming up around these issues. So all are welcome. I will have to say one or two unkind words about some other politicians. I wouldn't be me if I didn't. But I mean by that no barrier to supporters of other parties being involved in this campaign. Let me start at the beginning. For me, I joined this struggle around the issue of Palestine in the midsummer of 1975. I know I'm older than I look. In 1975, I joined this campaign, and you could have fitted every supporter of the PLO in the whole of Britain in this room and had room for many elephants at the back. It was a very, very small campaign that I joined in 1975. Now we are literally millions. And we are millions because of two things. First of all, the sheer scale of the suffering of the Palestinian people has finally broken out in the era of social media, has finally broken out to a mass audience and in every corner of the world. And secondly, we have become millions because people in this country and others, it's a paradox, one of many, have never been better informed than they are today. By which I mean this: if you stopped 10 people in any street in the whole of Britain and asked them about this, you would find people in every cohort of 10 who knew the truth, who knew the facts, at least in rudiment, on this question. And that's why I'm appearing amongst you tonight, not despondent at all. And I want you not to be despondent. The Palestinians are not despondent. Indeed, the Palestinians are celebrating a victory. What do they mean by a victory? As long as the Palestinians continue to exist and resist, that's a victory. And that's they don't have to win these military encounters. And indeed, how could they win them? They just have to keep existing and keep resisting. And as long as they exist and resist, support for them all around the world is growing exponentially. And the balance of power, therefore, in the world is changing very, very significantly. And as one put it to me on the telephone from Gaza just this morning, they killed 1,000 of us, but more than 1,000, by the grace of God, more than 1,000 Palestinians were born in the same 2 weeks that they killed 1,000 of us. Israel cannot solve its problems by killing, because the Palestinian people have grown now from the 800,000 who were driven out of their country in 1948. Now the Palestinians in exile alone number more than 12 million people. And there will be some here in this room this evening, because there are some in every room, in every town, in every city, in every country of the world. So let's examine first and work backwards. As some of you have been very kind about a speech I gave in Parliament, which has just suddenly reappeared on YouTube, saying we are responsible for this tragedy. A young man very kindly downstairs congratulated me on it, thinking it had just been made. But in fact it was made 5 years ago, during the caste-led assault on Gaza. It's a measure of how actually directly comparable the two occasions are, that many people think that this speech was made last week. It was not. But everything I said 5 years ago, I could well have said last week. Right down to the fact that we're busy lecturing Russia, as we were 5 years ago. We're busy lecturing Russia today at the same time as exculpating Israel for its crimes at the same time. Let's examine some salient facts. And by the way, shout out, put your hand up, shout out if there's a specific question you want to ask me before we get to the end, because I like dealing with things in that way. The first point to mention is that the proximate cause, they said, of this murderous bombardment in Gaza was the kidnapping and murder of 3 illegal settler children in the West Bank near Hebron. These children were kidnapped and were cruelly murdered. No one can justify the murder of 3 unarmed 16-year-old boys. Israel said that Hamas had done it, and therefore they were going to bombard Gaza. Now just think of a comparison here. Imagine if someone from Manchester murdered someone from Liverpool, perhaps given the hatred between the two crowds, that's not a good metaphor. Let me change it to Bradford. Someone from Manchester had murdered 3 youth from Bradford. The idea that you would then launch a murderous bombardment of Middlesbrough, quite apart from the idea of collective punishment at all, if you find a murderer, you have to punish the murderer, not punish everybody who lives in the same town or area as the murderer. How much more absurd, therefore, is it to actually bombard an entirely different city? No one from Gaza could possibly have been involved in the murder of these 3 children because no one can get out of Gaza. The entire population of Gaza is locked up in Gaza, and by definition could not have had anything at all to do with the murder of these 3 children. But it turns out this very day that Israeli sources are now indicating that Hamas had nothing to do with the murder of these 3 children at all. It was actually carried out, they now say, by Al-Qaeda elements in the West Bank. That's the same Al-Qaeda they're supporting in Syria, by the way. The same Al-Qaeda that they're supporting in Iraq, by the way. But it now turns out, they say, that it was Al-Qaeda elements in the West Bank that killed these 3 children. So let me get this right. 3 children were killed, you blamed Hamas, and you bombarded Gaza, an entirely separate area, separated by almost 100 miles. But now you tell us it wasn't Hamas at all? How do you say sorry for the death of 1,000 people? And by the end of this meeting, certainly by tomorrow, we will have reached the 1,000 dead figure. 1,000 dead, 5,000 maimed, simply unable to be treated, the hospitals completely overwhelmed, and in parenthesis, what praise is it possible to level towards those doctors and nurses and medical staff in the Gaza hospitals who have been working day and night, often without power, up to their ankles in blood, without basic medical equipment, without basic medicines. And some of them are foreigners. And one in particular, a doctor from Scandinavia who's been a lot in the media. I've launched a campaign to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm going to be more worthy of it than Barack Obama, who got it before he'd even begun being president. Maybe that was wise because he certainly couldn't get it now. These doctors have had to deal with a tidal wave of grief. And some people criticize, I saw one of the Liberal commentators doing so in The Guardian this week, they criticize putting out pictures of these dead children on social media. I utterly reject that criticism. If people don't want to be confronted with the babies torn apart in Gaza, they should do something about the fact that the children are being torn apart. So 5,000 are maimed. Most of those will be maimed for the rest of their lives. There's very little in the way of rehabilitation possibilities for severely injured people. And Gaza is a land of wheelchairs and crutches. The previous cast left thousands of people in wheelchairs and on crutches, if they could get the wheelchairs. We brought some of those wheelchairs in, and the desperate shortage of them was truly humbling. So now we have a new mountain of problems for the authorities in Gaza to deal with. Not just the maimed, how to deal with them, not just the hospitals, how to keep them running, but the homeless. Here's a statistic that I have not yet seen broadcast on any mainstream broadcaster. Almost 100,000 people in Gaza who are already refugees are now refugees within Gaza and cannot go back to their own houses. Indeed, Israel has told them not to go back, even during this 12-hour ceasefire. Don't go back to your homes, they said. Well, where do you go? Perhaps you could go to a United Nations school. Perhaps that United Nations school could inform the Israeli authorities of the exact coordinates of that school and how many people were sheltering in it. Virtually every one of them, a woman or her children. But that would be unwise too, because just on Thursday, one of those schools was hit by four separate Israeli shells, with the killing now of more than 20 and the maiming of more than 200 and the terrorizing of every single woman and child who thought they were safe in a United Nations building, but who were massacred in that building. 4 shells, and that's the 4th United Nations building that has been attacked. And so here I just ask this question. Israel as a state was created by the United Nations, yet it has defied the United Nations more often, more seriously, than any, in fact, all other countries in the United Nations combined. It has broken more UN resolutions than all the countries of the UN combined together. So how come Israel is allowed to remain a member of the United Nations? How can that be possible? How is it possible that a member state can defy over decades hundreds of demands of the United Nations and bomb and kill people in United Nations schools and clinics and still turn up and be given a seat and a red carpet and a flag and a platform at the United? What do you need to do to get put out of the United Nations? What would you actually need to do? Iraq was broken and destroyed, invaded and occupied because it was said that it had broken 2 United Nations resolutions. As it turned out, it actually hadn't broken any. But on the basis that it had broken 2, Iraq was pulverized. 1 million Iraqis were slaughtered in the name of the inviolability of United Nations decisions. So this Ban Ki-moon, or Donkey Moon I call him, this Donkey Moon, when is he going to do something If not for the Palestinians, then for the United Nations staff that were killed and maimed in these 4 attacks on United Nations headquarters. So 100,000 people are homeless, 5,000 people have been maimed, 1,000 people have been killed, most of them have been women and children. And Gaza, of course, is an open-air prison. It's very important for those of you who haven't been there to understand this. Gaza is only 21 miles long and only 4.5 miles wide. That's a tiny, tiny strip of land clinging on to the Mediterranean shore of what had been the whole of Palestine. 80% of the people in Gaza don't come from Gaza. If you've ever seen Gaza, it's really quite a rough and basic place. Most of the people in Gaza are refugees from elsewhere in Palestine who were driven there in 1948, then again in 1967, still more after 1970 in the bloody September events in Black September 1970 in Jordan. People in Gaza can actually see their own land, many of them, through the wire. They can see the land that was theirs. They can see the land where once their village stood. They can even see trees that their grandfathers planted, with other people enjoying the fruit upon them, whilst they stare from their rat-infested hovels in this hellhole called Gaza. And when I describe it as such, I don't mean in any way to demean the people who live there, who turn their children out pristine and clean every morning to go to these United Nations schools, those that have survived. But the squalor and poverty and degradation in which they have been forced to live for more than 65 years. As Cherie Blair herself said 10 years ago, the wonder is not that there are suicide bombers, the wonder is that there are not more suicide bombers. If you had to live for 65 years in this camp, what would you do about it? This is moving on to some important hard facts that people have to grasp, and it's my duty to put them to you because no one else will. The Palestinian people are not a charity case. They're not animals in a zoo. We're not asking people to feed them buns through the bars. We're not asking people to feel sorry for them. They are a people with a right to exist and with a right to resist. So the next time you're told or asked, why are the Palestinians fighting Israel? Tell them because Israel wiped their country off the map and scattered their people to the four corners of the earth. The Palestinian people have exactly the same legal and moral right to resist their occupier, their invader, as we would have had ourselves. And it's the fact that so many British people and others can't see that that is one of the principal problems in this story. If Hitler had crossed the channel and occupied our country, we would be like the Palestinian resistance. We'd be firing rockets at them if we were lucky enough to get our hands on any rockets. We'd be fighting them with our hands, with our teeth, if necessary, because they have no right to be here. They have no right to steal our land, steal our houses. They have no right to kill our people. And we're going to fight them back. That's what we would say. Why do I stress this? Because every single political leader, everyone, Cameron, who says he stands staunchly behind Israel, Miliband, who declares the first, the only ever Labour leader ever to do so, declares, I am a Zionist. Why did he do that? It's not even true, I'm sure. Certainly his mother and father were never Zionists, who would have described themselves as anti-Zionists. His mother's on the demonstration in London today, and his father's turning in his grave at his son making such a statement. If there's one thing worse than being a Zionist, it must be to pretend you're a Zionist to get money and votes from people who are putting out for that. Flag is not worth wasting breath on, but all three of them insist that Israel has the right to go on occupying Palestine and its people without the Palestinians fighting them back. Well, we reject that. The Palestinians have every right to fight. They have a duty to fight, and we have to support them in their fight. Otherwise, we're saying that they should be allowed untroubled to take what they have taken and to continue forever to hold it. And I don't think that many takers for that exist in this room, but I can promise you there are virtually no Palestinians who are ready to accept that proposition. So this murderous onslaught is just the latest paroxysm of violence. And we have been through many of those, and many of you have been too. Ron and I met in Beirut in 1977 in a Palestinian refugee camp called Shatila. Sabra and Shatila, just 5 years later, in 1982, became the scene of an horrific massacre of almost 5,000 Palestinian refugees. Almost all of them, again, women and children, because the fighters had been tricked into leaving Beirut. The American plenipotentiary, Philip Habib, signed a document that the international community would protect their families if they agreed to go, and no sooner had the ships sailed out of the harbor in Beirut than Sharon, may God burn him in the hellfires for eternity, Sharon directed the massacre of the refugees in Sabra and Shatila. We were also in Jenin in the early part of the last decade, I think 2002, when the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank had been set upon and razed to the ground and hundreds of people slaughtered. In fact, we were there, the dead were unburied in the camp. The camp of Jenin is quite an interesting one too, because the people in Jenin camp can actually see the city of Haifa from their rooftop. A beautiful, silvery city by the sea, Haifa. The name itself, beautiful. Many people call their girls Haifa. The people in the camp in Jenin, which is 1 square kilometer, in which 14,000 families live, literally on top of each other, in jerry-built hovels. If they can climb up to a roof, they can see Haifa, which was their city, and from which they have been driven, and their houses now lived in by foreigners from Britain, from France, from the United States, mainly actually from the United States and many other places. There have been a long line of these massacres from 1948 until now, and they're not going to stop. Even if this ceasefire lasts not 12 hours but 12 days or 12 weeks, they're not going to stop. So let me move on to the question that we can do something about. And that is the way in which the British media has systematically lied, covered up, ignored the truth in this disaster over the last few weeks. I could give a whole lecture on this. Chomsky could write a whole book on this. The misappropriation of the language, the distortion of words, the twisting of meanings, the reversal of meanings. They start off banal. 20 Palestinians died, 2 Israelis were killed. Israelis are killed, Palestinians merely died. Or the New York Times headline, which had 15 Israeli soldiers killed, 70 others. 70 becomes others. But 15 have to be honored. The newscasters, television crews go to their funerals. Sky News will tell you their names, their sister's name, their wife's name. Their weeping children at the graveside will be pictured. We've seen it all so many times before. Shalit, everybody knows his name, Shalit, the Israeli soldier that was captured by the resistance in Gaza and eventually exchanged for 1,000 Palestinian political prisoners, most of whom have been rearrested and taken back now behind bars, again in clear breach of the internationally guaranteed agreement that was made. Everybody knew Shalit. Who knows any Palestinian prisoners? There are thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Who knows any of their names? Because the media, as I put it to that Egypt on Sky News in 2006, what's her name?
Okay.
Anna Botting. As I put it to her in 2006, the more discerning of your viewers already know, from every nuance in your voice, from every line written on your face, that you regard the blood of Palestinian people as less important, less valuable than the blood of Israeli people and other Western, so-called Western people. And that's what lies behind this. 15 Israeli soldiers killed, 70 others. When you're reduced to a nameless, placeless, faceless other, when you're lucky if even your number makes it into the news, how can this be tolerable? How can we claim to have a free press? I work for Russia Today. We've just been threatened with another Ofcom investigation like the one they did with Press TV before they took Press TV off the Sky platform. Because they say foreign broadcasters must live up to the same standards of impartiality as British broadcasters are required to do. Sir, you've got to be as impartial as Fox News. You've got to be as impartial as Rupert Murdoch's Sky News and all his other media interests. But of course, we can do nothing about murder. But we can do something about the BBC. You know, when I was a kid, the BBC was something to be proud of. I was, in fact, proud of it. And people all over the world knew it and respected it more actually than they should have. But they did respect it. In the run-up to the Iraq War, I called it the Bush and Blair Corporation. I thought it could fall no lower, but it has, in this last few weeks, fallen still lower. Its distortion, its willful neglect of facts and activities. Last Saturday, 100,000 people marched in London, not 1 mile from the BBC, and not only did they not broadcast 1 second of the footage of that demonstration, at first they didn't even mention it on their website, and when they did eventually mention it on their website, they had to illustrate it with a picture taken from Channel 4 News. So the great British Broadcasting Corporation didn't even send a stills photographer to a demonstration of 100,000 people just a mile from their headquarters. So I put it this way: I am not prepared to pay money to the BBC so that they can systematically lie to the British people. It's no longer a criminal offence, so although I say you can take me to jail if you like, actually they can't any longer take you to jail. They can't even fine you for not paying your licence fee. It's a civil matter. between you and the BBC. But I was involved in the campaign that destroyed Mrs. Thatcher's poll tax. And what destroyed Mrs. Thatcher's poll tax was the fact that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people refused to pay it. If enough of us refuse to pay our BBC license fee, the entire thing will come crashing down. And I'm asking you to join me in that campaign. Negotiate with us. They can say, come and tell us what your complaints are. They could address our grievances. But as long as they continue to be a big lie machine, I, for one, am not going to pay for it. And I hope you'll join me in that. Now, the second thing that we can do something about must, I'm afraid, bring me to some party politics. The vast majority of members of parliament are supporting Israel in this conflict. Why? I honestly don't understand why, and I've been in politics a very long time. I would have thought the time was right for politicians, for a political party, to stand up and be clear and tell the truth about Palestine. It's certainly working for us. You've all come to our meeting. People are joining Respect at a record rate. If you want to do that, go to the website, respectparty.org. I think there's also leaflets around here. It's working for us. Why can't they see it would work for them? Why are all these politicians so terrified of the Zionist lobby? Well, the answer is they're more afraid of them than they are of you. And that's what's got to change. You see, if they think you're going to support them anyway, whatever they do, whatever they don't do, whatever they say, whatever they don't say, you've got no choice. You have to vote for them. As long as they feel that way, why should they do any different? Why should they upset the Zionists if you're going to vote for them anyway? Better to take your vote and not upset the Zionists. Think about it. It's obvious. You have to make them as afraid of you as they self-evidently are afraid of the Zionist lobby. Now here I want to make something very clear. When I say Zionist lobby, I do not, repeat, do not mean Jews. There are huge numbers of Jews on our demonstrations. Some of them are rabbis. Some of them are marching at the front on a Saturday, having walked all the way from North London because their religion doesn't allow them to take any form of automotive transport. We even had, on our first demonstration 2 weeks ago, you may have seen the picture, a rabbi climbed up on top of a London bus and stood there with his placard. Secular Jews, left-wing, progressive Jews. We have actually, as a proportion, more Jews in our campaign than we have anybody else. Think about the numbers and you'll see that I'm right. So I'm not talking about Jews. We have no quarrel with Jews. Absolutely none. And if I see anybody employing fascist or Hitlerist or anti-Semitic arguments or pictures, I strike them, block them, ban them, and shun them. And you should do the same. Our conflict is not with Jews. In fact, our claim is that Zionism is destroying all that was great about the Jewish people. It has led the Jewish people down a blind alley which has led them to this. And where is this? This is not the Holocaust, and people should not compare it to the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the systematic, industrialized annihilation of perhaps 10 million people, more than half of whom were Jews. They built factories to murder people. This is not the Holocaust. But the Israelis are behaving like Nazis. Collective punishments are a Nazi tactic. When the partisans in occupied Europe struck against the Nazi occupying force, the Nazis lined up entirely innocent people and shot them dead, killed them, executed them in a collective punishment. If you have partisans in this town, then we're going to kill you until you expose who they are. This was denounced all over the world as heinous, Hitlerite, collective punishment. Yet somehow we're told by the media and the politicians here in the West that it's acceptable when it's happening in Gaza. This is not the Holocaust, but it is the Warsaw Ghetto. This comparison I insist upon because I happen to know quite a lot about it. The Jews in Warsaw were rounded up by the Nazis and put in a ghetto behind barbed wire, which they patrolled with their guard dogs and their guns, watchtowers, ready to fire in to the ghetto at any time. They tightly controlled the number of calories, very scientifically. Just exactly how many calories can we allow these Jews in there to eat so that they won't die, but that they will remain weak and getting weaker. They refused to allow medicine, doctors, any kind of aid into the Warsaw Ghetto. Illness, disease began to lay waste the people trapped in that ghetto. Regular Gestapo raids into the ghetto killed anyone who was suspected of being a militant inside the ghetto. Finally, the Jews in the ghetto made a decision. Do we continue to die one by one from starvation, thirst, illness and disease, abjectly on our knees? Or do we all stand up and confront these murderers and die on our feet? And the people of the Warsaw Ghetto have written their name into history because that's the choice they made. They decided they would rather die on their feet than go on living on their knees. And they stood up and they confronted the Nazis. And that's exactly what the Palestinians are doing in Gaza. Now some idiot on Twitter, a Zionist, just answered me on this point by saying the Jews in the Warsaw ghettos weren't firing rockets every day at the Germans. Well, that's because they didn't have any rockets. But if they had had rockets, we'd all have been cheering them every time they fired a rocket at the Nazis. I only have one other point to make before I ask you to contribute. Ron, being a Scotsman, makes the point that the hospitality was wonderful, but the room is not free. It is £200 for the room. So as you go out, there will be buckets. Please, with a crowd like this, we really ought to be able to cover the cost of the room and maybe a little bit more. Last point I want to make is this, and it's to the Muslims in the audience, not because Palestine is a Muslim issue. Not all Palestinians are Muslims in any case. Many Palestinians are Christians. A guy called Jesus was a Palestinian, of course. Not because non-Muslims have no responsibilities in this matter. As a matter of fact, every British person has a responsibility in this matter, as we were the authors of this disaster in the first place, and our country is continuing to assist in keeping the disaster going. No, not for any of those reasons. Just because this is Ramadan, I think last night or tonight, Laylat al-Qadr, the most important night in Ramadan, a night when Muslims believe that their prayers and requests are many times more powerful and important. I want to make this point to the Muslims in the audience. The one question on the lips of every Palestinian child who's lost her mother and father, the one question on the lips of every Palestinian child who's left homeless now tonight, the one question on the lips of every mother and father whose child has been killed is this: where is this ummah that they teach us about in school? Where is this ummah that they talk about in the mosque? Why have they left us to face this alone? And this is a very big question I address to the Muslims here. You're here, you haven't left them alone, but they don't know that. All they know is that all these Muslim countries, with their armies and their navies and their air forces and all the weapons that they buy constantly, multi-billion-dollar weapons contracts with British and American and French military suppliers. All these Muslim countries with their big leaders, kings and presidents. All these Muslim countries with their trillions and trillions of dollars invested in Western banks and stock markets and so on. Where are they? What kind of Islam is this? What kind of Muslims are you? Fasting and praying while we're dying. Breaking your fast while we're eating blood and earth and hot steel. What kind of Muslims are you? This is a question, the biggest of all the questions in this. There are 350 million Arabs. There are 1.7 billion Muslims. There are 7 million Israelis. How is it possible that 65 years later, Al-Aqsa is still in chains, under siege, in the hands of foreigners? How is it possible that right now, or at least when this ceasefire ends, foreigners will be again running rampage, killing, slaughtering Muslims and Christians indiscriminately? That's the question I ask you to ask God in your prayers tonight. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
We had 2,000, 3,000 in Manchester the other day on Wednesday. There's been conflicts with the Zionists in town this afternoon. There's going to be there's a public meeting here on the 29th. And also there's going to be another rally in Manchester on Wednesday evening at between 5:30 and 7 o'clock. So we want everybody to attend all these activities. There's no doubt in my mind that we are seeing a change. And it's interesting to me at the Irish Club, because in 1916, when there was an uprising against the Irish, it was the brutality of the British when they gunned down and executed the leaders that turned the whole Irish population against Britain and imperialism. It changed things. And I think there's a change taking place. And I can feel it. And it's only I was 50 years ago this week that I first went into the U.S. Navy in 1965, conscripted in there. As a kid, saluting the flag. 3 years later, coming out, and I burned the flag. And I've been an anti-war activist ever since. And I've got a lot of experience. For giving us this platform here today. Not every political party would give us a platform, but we have to take them wherever we can. And it's so good to see so many young people there. And it's not going to be a short struggle, you know? It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen because I can feel that change coming along. I'll tell you, if we do what's necessary, we mobilize, we organize, we resist, we educate ourselves, there'll come a day, I guarantee, we're going to see that day. It may not be soon, when all of us are going to walk arm in arm arm in arm with the Palestinians, and we're going to march into the center of Palestine.
Now that's the kind of American we like. You're very lucky that Ron's based up here. So follow the Stop the War Coalition, please, and turn out for their events. And there's leaflets spelling out the dates, times, and places. It's your turn now. Who wants to say something? Gentleman right at the very back, who's either very tall or standing on something.
David Cameron likes to talk about the Magna Carta. Next year is the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta. It established the right to a fair trial. It established innocence until proven guilty. And where is innocence until proven guilty? Where is the right to a fair trial when you're in a school in Gaza and it gets shelled by the Israelis? Why does he support the Israelis?
Well, for money, I'd guess. I don't mean for his own personal pocket, though maybe that as well, who knows, certainly in the future. But if you've seen the Dispatches program, which showed the sheer professionalism of the way that the Zionist lobby funds the mainstream political parties, I would guess that the answer to your question is money. Yes, the gentleman in braces there, very smartly turned out. Go ahead.
But I want to first just thank you for your attitude and to inspire people to become more aware. Just to thank you for the many years you've dedicated to the cause. Yeah. And just to also say, we are now operating in two realities. One is the physical reality, and one is the online reality. What kind of strategies people can use, such as social media, to empower the world movement?
Well, brother, this meeting was called entirely on social media. Not a single leaflet, not a single poster, not a single advertisement, and not only that, we had to change the venue at the 11th hour. And look at this. And these great events are overwhelmingly being called through social media. You know, Chairman Mao had a great piece of wisdom in which he said that sometimes the enemy struggles mightily to lift a huge stone only to drop it on its own feet. That's what they've done with this new internet technology. In fact, they invented all this hoping to make really big profits out of it. But the real gainers of this new technological revolution are us, because we can all talk to each other without going through Rupert Murdoch, without being censored. We can talk to each other, we are talking to each other, and look at the enormous numbers that are coming together. Ron is right. You can really feel something happening here. I don't know how many turned out in London today. I'm told, again, it was vast. And even if the BBC continues to ignore us, millions and millions already know what we are about, and they're coming along with us. Yes, the lady in the middle in the pink dress.
I'm glad to hear, and I've read also, that there are some reasonable Jewish people in this country who see reason, and they are sympathetic to the Palestinian trouble. The trouble is that I find that if you want to enter into a reasonable, polite discussion, and I have a lot of Jewish neighbours and associates, if you want to discuss very politely and with no side, reasonably the situation, you are immediately cut off by saying you're anti-Semitic. And you dare not open your mouth. And as I say, I have some Jewish friends and neighbours, but even if I was to meet one on the street, I cannot, my tongue is tied. And I think that is the problem. A lot of people are terrified to, and I and a lot of people are not anti-Semitic at all. But we would like a reasonable discussion. But we can't have it.
Well, first of all, Don't say that you won't dare, because I don't believe it. You do open your mouth, because you're brave. Dare, Mr. Ben, God rest his soul, used to say, dare to... Tony used to say, Mr. Ben used to say, dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone. That's what his father taught him. That's what he did all his life. And that's what we have to do. So at the risk of some disapproval from your neighbors, you have a duty, as I'm sure you're already doing, to raise, without rancor, without hatred, to raise the truth of the issues we're discussing here. And here's some pointers for you. First of all, Arabs are Semites. It's very clear. All the Palestinians are Semites. So it isn't possible to be anti-Semitic by supporting the Palestinians. Secondly, most of the Israelis are not Semites. Most of the Israelis are Europeans. Most of the Israelis came from Eastern and Central Europe and don't have a Semitic scintilla or cell in their bodies. So this is bunkum. Just insist that we don't hate Jews. In fact, some of the greatest human beings that ever lived were not only Jews, but anti-Zionist Jews. Einstein, the greatest mind of modern times, the father of modern science and nuclear technology, was asked to be the president of Israel, the first president of Israel. And he said, I could never be the president of a country whose future happiness was going to be built on the misery of the people who lived there in the past. Don't be afraid. Yes, the lady at the front.
Yeah, hi. We're obviously here to talk about the issue that's happening in Gaza and Palestine with the Israelis and their bombardment and barbaric behaviour. But if we look at the situation that's happening there with the support of America and Britain and France, how do we then look at the issue that's happening? Surely there are some issues that we can also see that are happening in Nigeria at the moment with Boko Haram and what's going on in Nigeria at the moment with those same forces.
Boko Haram, whatever, by the way, whatever happened to that campaign about those 300, 500 girls? Whatever happened to those girls? Whatever happened to that campaign? The newspapers focused on it for 5 minutes and then walked away. Michelle Obama was out, bring back our girls, and then forgot about it. The hypocrisy of these people knows no bounds. Boko Haram is a part of the Al-Qaeda network in the world. And as I indicated earlier, we are the allies of Al-Qaeda. We helped to create Al-Qaeda in the first place in Afghanistan in the 1980s. We sent bin Laden to Afghanistan in the 1980s. We gave him guns and money and diplomatic and political support. If you look at Rambo 5, I know it's asking a lot. If you look at Rambo 5 and wait to the end of the credits, you'll see at the end of the credits this film is dedicated to the Mujahideen freedom fighters in Afghanistan, who of course included Al-Qaeda. Reagan and Thatcher both paraded Al-Qaeda on their conference platforms as freedom fighters. So it's a bit difficult to be gung-ho against Boko Haram when you're actually gung-ho behind the same kind of people in Syria and in Iraq. Although in Iraq they're keeping it quiet for the moment. In Nigeria, we have this fanatic, takfiri extremism, which, as the name suggests, believe that books are haram, that there's only one book, that all other books are somehow banned, forbidden to us, but taking other people's daughters and taking them off as slaves, or forcibly marrying them, or God knows whatever else they've done to them, that's all right. It's haram to read a book, but it's halal to take off a young schoolgirl and use her as you please. This kind of sickness inside the Muslim Ummah is something that we have to address. It doesn't impact on Palestine. These people have virtually no traction in Palestine. There are Al-Qaeda elements, Israel now tells us, but no one knows who they are or what organizations they might be referring to. Yes, the gentleman in the green t-shirt, standing up.
Thank you very much, Lord Galloway. First of all, I'd like to thank you. This is my first time in such a meeting, and so many people have responded. I won't divide this group into Muslims or non-Muslims. We are all human beings. We have shrugged off a bystander's effect. We have come here to do something about it. We have seen so many times the protests, everything is falling on deaf ears. What do we have to do from here? There has to be a take-home message as a group, as this congregation, so that we can pass this message forward to all our other colleagues, friends, family, to make a bigger group and to make some kind of impact. What do you think that would be?
Well, I've tried to give some, this is a respect meeting, so I hope you'll all join respect. That would be a massive... We are the only party that stands unequivocally in support of Palestine and opposition to Israel and its works, and against imperialism and against war. We're the only party that does that, and I think we deserve your support. So that's the first thing I'm hoping you'll do. The second thing I'm hoping you'll do is, if you don't have a Twitter account, get one. If you don't have a Facebook account, get one, and follow me on both of them. Because this is the fastest way for me to speak to you and you to speak to me without anyone interfering. So follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. 500,000 people now have. Let's make it bigger. The bigger it gets, the more afraid of us they'll be. Thirdly, join me in refusing to pay your license fee to the BBC as long as they are a lie machine telling lies to the British people on this matter. Take that. I mean, it's not much of a sacrifice. I'm not asking you to give your blood. I'm not asking you to go to jail. Just asking you to withhold your license fee for a bit. It's not asking too much, is it? No. So let's all do that. Let's support the Stop the War Coalition in their marches, their pickets. Every time there's an outing, an agitation, join it and bring other people with you. There are things that you can be doing.
Boycotting Israel's goods. Yeah,
Go on.
Boycotting Israel's goods.
I was just about to come on to this overarching point. In Bradford today, we resolved, we've still got to persuade the council and the other MPs, but we resolved in Centenary Square in Bradford today that Bradford would be an Israel-free city. We don't want... any store to sell any Israeli product, and if they do, we'll be down on them. We'll be picketing them. We don't want any Israeli services. We don't want any Israeli academics coming to the university or the college, and if they do, we'll picket them and demonstrate against them until they break. Secondly, we resolved today to demand that Bradford City Council twin with Gaza. In 1980, I twinned my city of Dundee with the Palestinian town of Nablus. It's lasted 34 years. The Palestinian flag has been flying on the Dundee Town Hall for 34 years. And other towns did the same. When I was a Glasgow MP, Glasgow twinned with Bethlehem. That's 25 years ago nearly, and that flag is still flying too. Preston is flying the Palestinian flag today. Bradford Town Hall is flying the Palestinian flag today. Let's see Manchester Town Hall. Of boycott, I was deeply involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. I was even underground for the ANC inside apartheid South Africa. And Mandela always said that apartheid would be smashed between the hammer of the ANC and the anvil of international solidarity, boycott, divestment and sanctions around the world. A hammer could not have done it alone. An anvil, by definition, could not have done it alone. You need a hammer and an anvil. The Palestinian resistance are the hammer. We have to be the anvil everywhere in the world. Boycott Israel. Boycott. Yes, gentlemen, there.
So, I hear a lot about the Ummah and where all the Islamic nations went with regards to helping Palestine. The one thing I don't hear much about is President Abbas. I want to know what your take is on him, because it wasn't long ago that I remember there was a conflict between Hamas and Fatah, and they were happy to slaughter each other. Now that the Palestinians have risen in the West Bank, and they're starting to become slaughtered as well, I want to know what you think about President Abbas and what he's doing, and if he's actually a strong enough leader for the Palestinian people.
Well, the question of who is the leader of the Palestinian people is a matter for them. We're not in a position to, and nor do we have a right to, choose the leadership of the Palestinian people. I was all my life with President Arafat. I met him when I was 21 years old. I was at his bedside in Paris when he died after being murdered. I have no doubt Arafat had many faults and made many mistakes, but when Arafat was alive, everybody in the world knew that the Palestinians had one address, and that address was him, wherever he happened to be, dodging the Israeli bullets and shells and bombs. Since he died, that's why they killed him, there's been a period of vacuum and division inside the Palestinian people. Ironically, or perhaps not ironically, maybe this is one of the reasons for this recent war. A national unity agreement had finally been reached between the factions of the Palestinian movement. And President Abbas was about to move back into Gaza, into his presidential compound there, which had been rebuilt and has now been destroyed again. All we should do is urge the Palestinian people to unite themselves behind one leadership. All we should do is urge the Palestinians and encourage them and help them to be as united as it's possible to be in the face of such a behemoth, such a Goliath as is assailing them. I had one demand. For me, the most powerful Palestinian leader is the prisoner Marwan Barghouti, who is, I think, Palestine's Mandela. Mandela was the leader from behind bars. Barghouti is the moral leader of the Palestinian people, I believe. He can unite all the factions and tendencies in a way that nobody else can. And so I always raise the demand for the release of Marwan Barghouti as the leading, though by far and away not the only Palestinian political prisoner leader behind bars in an Israeli dungeon. I won't say more. Gentleman behind you.
I know that you and Rod have both said that this is a moment where you can feel a change, and this is actually the first meeting I've ever been to.
Oh, really?
But what I wanted to ask you
You
was...
chose the right one.
But what was the moment for you, Mr. Galloway, in terms of your, you're a champion for Palestine. What moment was it?
It was entirely by chance, actually, and for every one of you who is involved in persuading or dawah or approaching other people about things. This is an important story. I was 21 years old. In fact, I was still 20, soon to be 21. I was working alone in the Labour Party office in Dundee, a small Scottish city in the northeast of the country. I had never met a Muslim, I had never met an Arab, and the doorbell started ringing and ringing and ringing. Because I was printing leaflets in the old-fashioned way with my arms covered in ink up to the elbows, I didn't want to answer the door, but the door kept ringing. That's the first lesson. Keep ringing the bell. And when I opened it, there was a handsome young Arab man there, looked like Omar Sharif. At that time, I thought all the Arabs looked like Omar Sharif. I soon learned different. And he said that he wanted to come in and talk to the leaders of the party about Palestine. I said, there are no leaders here, but you can talk to me and I'll talk to them. So he came in, and for 2 hours, he talked to me in a mesmerizing way about the disaster that had overcome his people, what had happened to them. He placed it in the right context, he used the right language, he didn't use any of the wrong language. And at the end of that 2 hours, I was a member of the Palestinian resistance, and I remain one to this day, and until my last one. One of our veterans from the siege-breaking convoys to Gaza. Go ahead, comment.
We have a good leader. That's why we managed to break the siege on Gaza in 2008. It was only because of George and his leadership and rallying behind a party that we managed to achieve something at the time. So for those of you who have asked the question, what can we do here to support Palestine and support Gaza? The only way for us here, really, to be able to achieve anything is to rally behind a good leader, behind a good party, because to tell you the truth, otherwise we cannot do it. When we went to Gaza the first time, and we did break the siege, we had lots of fights on the way with Mubarak, with others, in Tunisia, etc. We had George there to plan, to sort out things for us. And to tell you the truth, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters here, we can write to the BBC, we can write to the MPs, we can do all these things, we can boycott or ask people to boycott Israeli products. This will take maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, 4 months, and then we are going to stop, talking about it, and things are going to be normal. You wanted to sustain a good approach, and to do it long term. And the only way we can do it, because to tell you the truth, George and his party, to us as Palestinians, he's more Palestinians than some Palestinians. He's more Muslim than the Muslims. He's more Muslims than Muslims. Follow his party, look for more Georges, 3, 4 more Georges, and Palestine is going to be free. My son, yes, my son, Habib Mohammed, is only 12. He came up with this idea that he wanted to take, because I'm going second day of Eid, inshallah, I'm going to Palestine. He wanted the children of this country, from England, from Britain, to give me some postcards. Write whatever you want on it, any words of support, because the children in Palestine now are feeling alone and lonely. Wanted anything to wipe a tear from their faces, a drawing, anything you like. I'm not asking for much, just a postcard, and I promise I will take them with me and give it to the children. You can send them, I don't know which is more convenient place here.
Send them to me at the House of Commons.
Okay.
Can I just say something? Sorry, I got a text, but I didn't know it was you.
All right, well, it's national. It's turned into a national
So I've been
campaign.
coordinating that with just some friends in my local neighborhood. While I was here, I thought I'd get a book, pass it around if people wanted to do it. So there's actually a book going around.
Excellent.
Now,
Right here.
well done. Thank you. See the creativity of the people. So, if you want to send postcards and you want it to be taken, you have to do it right away because the Eid is almost upon us. It's going on the second day of Eid. Send them to me, George Galloway MP, House of Commons, London. That'll get there. And you can pick them up from my office. Thank you, Comrade. Go ahead.
We've all been watching the images on TV and on social media, and horrific images, horrific atrocities that are going on. As the gentleman there said, pools and rivers of blood and absolute despair. And we're all desperate to donate, we're all desperate to send aid, send money, send ourselves, but how does it get there? Who do we go through? How will it get to them?
Well, I think that's a very important point. I can only give you the recommendation that I give routinely, habitually, and have done for many years. The best charity to get aid money directly to the Palestinian people is Interpal. Interpal. All the others, no doubt, have their uses, but the most consistent, the most clear, the most efficient is Interpal. Look it up when you go back. INTERPAL.
Princess Parkway, Manchester.
Lots of people, but people keep saying to me, how are they going to get in? There's a blockade, how do they get in? So what do I answer? Because I don't want to disencourage the giving of money.
No, they have a track record better than anybody else. They have their ways, they have their means, and you can trust them 100%. We have to live where we are. We have to struggle in the space that we're in. We can't summon armies as yet non-existent into battles not yet fought. But all we can do, especially, I always put it this way, if you're a believer, and I infer that you are, there are two reasons for fighting. The first is that if you fight, you can't guarantee that you'll win. But if you don't fight, you can guarantee that you'll lose.
Yeah.
And the second is that on the last day, we will be asked what we did, not what... I won't be asked what you did, and you won't be asked what I did. We'll be asked what we did. And if when we're asked what we did when the slaughter of the Palestinians was happening, we can say that we gave every breath that we had to try and stop it, then that's the answer surely that will be, that the Almighty will be looking for. So it's not just because it's right, it's because we know that that's what's expected of us. If you're a believer, if you're not a believer, then the first answer pertains just as powerfully. You should fight this because it's right, whether or not. Now, what I would say is this. They control the textbooks. They control the curriculum. They control the BBC and Sky News. They control all the newspapers. But they're not controlling the minds of the people. Even in the Iraq War, before we knew that the whole case was a tower of lies, the majority of people were against them. In that fog of propaganda, war propaganda, most people saw through it. And you know something? In 2003, there was no Twitter. I don't think there was a Facebook. We had none of the tools in 2003 that we've now got. I asked Lindsay German of the Stop the War Coalition the other day for some footage of the 2003 demonstration, the 2 million march. She said there's not much footage because there was no camera phones in those days. Imagine, 2003, there was no camera phones. Now, we've all got camera phones. We've all got footage of everything. So, events are ineluctably marching our way. And they can control what they control until we can take it off them. But we control something that is becoming much more powerful. And this meeting proved that tonight. The young lady there with the bag over her shoulder. And then this one.
Thank you. I've been to some of the demonstrations in Manchester. Everything's fine, but I've been to one outside one of the Israeli shops selling Dead Sea goods.
Yeah, good.
So we've got Zionists there and then pro-Palestine on the side. The police today, they've been civil, but they keep saying Section 40 at us, and I just wondered if you know, is there a way around it? And then I just feel a lot of the Zionists.
What's Section 14? Remind me.
Kettling.
Kettling,
So we've got to move, also got to arrest us. Is there a way around it?
Well, move and come back. I mean, this is this is a war of movement, not a war of position. We have to strike and move and strike. That's why being highly mobile and being able to be contacted quickly and not through anybody else's prism is very, very important. But well done for doing that today. Don't be afraid of the Zionists. We are many. They are very, very, very few. Really very few. Even in Manchester, I know that they've got more supporters in Manchester than they do in Bradford. But it's not that many. It's certainly nothing in comparison with what we have. This woman in the thing.
What makes you so fearless of the Zionists? Aren't you scared of your life?
I'm not scared of anything but God and the judgment day. By the grace of God, I have many sons, including a new one who's 12 days old and is listening to me right now. If not me, after me, my sons after them, their sons. And that goes for all of you. I'm sure about that. Which one? Yes, go ahead.
Now that Palestine are recognised as an observer state of the UN, do you think they'll ever involve the ICC and try and get these Israelis into a criminal court in The Hague?
Not into the ICC, because Israel is not a signatory to the ICC and never would be, and therefore cannot be prosecuted in the ICC. You can only be prosecuted in the ICC if you're a signatory to it. But there will be other attempts to bring Israel to various courts, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so on. But I don't think they'll come to anything as yet. I just caution, I'm not against trying, and I'm not saying ignore the United Nations. It's just my view that courts and the United Nations in the end will not do very much for us until we have changed public opinion, until our thousands become millions. It's very important to know the difference. Don't call your tens hundreds, your hundreds thousands, your thousands millions. Let's make the thousands millions. We haven't done that yet. I said at the time that Tony Blair was appointed as the Middle East peace envoy, that not since Caligula appointed his horse as a proconsul of Rome has there been a more inappropriate appointment. But Caligula was only joking. He didn't actually appoint his horse as a proconsul of Rome. He just wanted to prove how subservient or obeisant the others would be, that if he did appoint his horse, they'd all bow to his horse as a proconsul of Rome. Unfortunately, we were not joking. We have made Tony Blair the Middle East peace envoy. And it's a pretty tired and sad joke. Now, 7 years he has been the peace envoy, during which time he's grown fat, 7 fat years for him, 7 very lean years for the Arabs and the Palestinians in particular. As you may know, I'm making a film called The Killing of Tony Blair. It doesn't involve me killing Tony Blair. It would be an even more successful film if it did, but it's going to be a blockbuster film, and it will be released at the end of this year, early next year, and Mr. Blair's getting very, very nervous about it, indeed. So if we don't get rid of him before the film comes out, when you're all queuing at the cinema to see it, I think that might just do it. But thanks for raising that. Now look, it's extremely hot. I said we'd go on till 7:30, but I'm toying with the idea, unless people are very angry at my suggestion, that we wrap the meeting up now, because those men who very gallantly, either at my invitation or prior to it, gave up their seats, are now getting weak at the knees, and the ladies are fanning themselves furiously. So let me sum up this. First of all, please donate something on your way out in the bucket. In the bucket. Please donate on your way out so that we can pay for this hall. Please thank you very much, sir. There's £30, my goodness. Any advance? Please, if you see any of the officials of the Irish Club on your way out, thank them for giving us this venue. Please join Respect. Go online, respectparty.org. Respectparty.org and join us. Here's cards if you want them. You'll go out and distribute them. And lastly, don't leave me standing on my own in front of the BBC.